I presume most of you have at one time or another seen some of these aerial balloons, the balloonists, who we have from time to time coming back from church in Gladewater. We've noticed you look up in the sky and you see these big colorful balloons, and people, you've got these balloonists that are out, and they're doing that. I remember different areas where we've seen that over a period of time. It's these hot air balloons. They're a very awesome sight to watch. They're beautiful, they're colorful, they're soaring up into the sky, and that's really is intriguing. I've seen people just stop alongside of the road, pull their cars over. They want to watch. Particularly when you see a whole bunch of them up there, and that's a beautiful sight as you see these balloons soaring up into the air. The same can be said that there are relationships, there are friendships that are sort of like those beautiful balloons. They soar up in the air. There are others that sort of lift off a little bit and come back down. Some of them never get off the ground. Some of them lift up and then they crash and burn. And that's, one of the things that I've always seen at campouts, that it seems like there's a unique opportunity for friendships. People get to know one another, whether it's our kids or whether it's our teens, and whether it's the adults. There are opportunities to develop friendships. You spend time together, you visit together, you get to know people in ways that you may not have opportunity in another set of circumstances. And I want to focus here at the beginning of the campout weekend, sort of focus our attention a little bit on relationships in general and friendships in particular, because I think it can set a little bit of a tone for the weekend. There are other things that we will cover tomorrow. As we look here, let's start out with a definition of what really is a friend. And this is something that from our children on up. Let's stop and think about it a little bit. How would you define a friend? What is a real friend? Well, God says in Proverbs 17:17, a friend loves at all times. That's, I think, one of the most excellent definitions, one of the finest definitions of friendship, because it zeroes in on something. A friend who's a real friend is there not just for the good times, but for the bad times. A friend loves at all times. It's real easy to sometimes be misled as to who your friends are. You remember the story of given back in the Gospels about the Prodigal Son? It was the story of two young men, two brothers. And one of them, younger brother, came to his father and he said, "Look, Dad," he said, "I don't want to be here on the farm anymore. I want my part of the inheritance now." And his father gave it to him. And he left. And he went away to a town. And you know what? For a while he had all kinds of friends. That was because he had money. And as long as the drinks were on him, the bar was filled with friends. He had all sorts of people that were glad to be his friends. He was paying. But as the story goes by, sooner or later he ran out of money. He'd gone through all of his inheritance, and he was down and out, and what he found was all of these friends that he thought he had, they weren't his friends anymore. They saw him coming, they were headed the other direction. And after a while, he became really down and out. He couldn't find a job. He was hungry. He finally got a job feeding pigs. And he was so hungry that sometimes he ate some of the food that was supposed to be for the pigs. And he was in a miserable situation. And he thought about it. And after a while he said, my the servants that work for my dad have it a whole lot better than I do. And he was, of course, ashamed to go back and face his father. He had wasted all this money and just made a mess of his life. But finally he said, I'll go back and I'll tell my father that I just like a job. I just like to go to work for him as a servant. I'm no more worthy to be called his son. Well, he started back. He came back and we're told that his father saw him coming a long ways off. He was standing there and he saw him coming up the road and he recognized him. And he ran and he met him and he was so glad to see him and he put his arms around him and he hugged him and he kissed him and he put a robe around him because he had on old ragged tattered clothes. He told one of his employees, one of his servants, he says, go kill the fatted calf. Go, let's have a barbecue. Let's celebrate. Because you see, he said, this, my son, was dead. He was as good as dead. He was gone. And now he's alive. He's back. And the father was really happy and thankful to see his son. Now, part of the question you have on that, something that must have occurred to that son at that time, was he finally found out who his real friends were. You see, the people he thought were his friends weren't really his friends. They were just in it for the good times. They were glad to be around him and be his friend if he had money and he was spending it and buying them things. But when he was out of money and he needed help, they were nowhere to be found. His father, on the other hand, that he didn't think was really his friend, he didn't think he wanted to be around Dad, all of a sudden he found out that was the real friend that he had. You see, that was the one who loved him at all times. The bad times as well as the good times. And this is a real key, that the heart and core of what is a friend is that a friend loves at all times. A real friend is somebody who's there for you when you're up and when you're down. Good times and the bad times. We're told on over in Proverbs 18:24, a man that has friends must show himself friendly. Now, how do you have? Everybody wants to have friends. There's a desire that we have. We all want others to like us, to appreciate us. We all have a desire for friends. And we all want the kind of friends who are real friends, the friends that love at all times. How do you have friends like that? Well, a man that has friends must show himself friendly. In order to have a friend, you've got to be a friend. You see, that's an important key. And that's something that applies to everyone from children all the way up to adults. That we have friends by being friends. Now, sometimes there's the wrong kind of friends. Proverbs 14 tells us they're false friends. It says in Proverbs 14:20, the poor is hated even of his own neighbor, but the rich has many friends. Now, what does that mean? The rich has many friends. Well, sort of like the son before he ran out of money. Somebody that's got a lot of money, that's got a lot of influence, there may be a lot of people around that claim to be his friend. But you see, that's not a real friend. That's a false friend. And there are a lot of that. Proverbs 19:4 makes a similar point. Wealth makes many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor. There are those, you see, who may have things, and because of what they have, it may seem like they have a lot of friends. But they have what are called fair weather friends. Not the kinds of friends that are that love at all times, but the kind of friends that are there for the good times. The kind of friends that are just there for the short term. Now, the Bible talks about the kind of people, the kind of friends, the kind of relationships to avoid. It says, for instance, in Proverbs 22, verse 24, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man you shall not go. Learn not his ways, and get a snare to your soul. Now, you know, if you spend time around somebody who's always angry and mad, well, that's not somebody that's going to be good to spend time with, because they'll wind up getting in trouble. Somebody who's always angry and mad, somebody who's going to be looking for trouble, looking for fights. And if you spend time with that kind of person, if that's the kind of person you hang around with, then it'll wind up getting you in trouble. It talks about in Proverbs 23, verse 17, let not your heart envy sinners, but be you in the fear of the Eternal all the day long. And it comes on down and says in verse 20, be not among winebibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty. So it says here that instead of sitting around being envious of people who seemingly are getting by with things, that's not to be the attitude. Not to be hanging around people who are doing the wrong kinds of things, people who are drinking too much, people who just have a wrong attitude and an approach to life, because we're all going to be affected and influenced by the people that we associate with. The Proverbs 1 is a description. You know, the whole book of Proverbs is written as advice from a father to a son. And it's an especially important book for young people, because this is the purpose of it. As it says in Proverbs 1 verse 4, to give subtlety to the simple, to the young man knowledge and discretion. It's a source of information to help those who maybe lack the experience of just having lived life. Proverbs is loaded with advice. And in verse 10 it says, my son, if sinners entice you, don't consent. You know, somebody tries to get you to go with them to do things that you shouldn't be doing, don't go. If they say, come with us, let's lay wait for blood, let's lurk privately for the innocent without cause, let's swallow them up alive. You know, we'll find, verse 13, we'll find all precious substance. We'll fill our house with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us have one purse. My son, walk not you in the way with them. Refrain your foot from their path. Their feet run to evil and make haste to shed blood. You see, here's somebody who's always looking for trouble. They're looking to do bad things to people. They're looking to hurt others. They're looking to take advantage of things, and they may make promises. Come on, we'll have a good time. We'll have a lot of fun. But there's trouble. Their feet run to evil. You know, they're headed for trouble. So there is a contrast here in terms of false friends, the kinds of friends to beware of, and the kind of real friends, the friends that stick closer than a brother. Let's notice there are things that can harm and do damage to friendships. There are things that can damage any sort of relationship. Notice in Proverbs 16. In Proverbs 16, 27 and 28, it says, an ungodly man digs up evil, and in his lips there is a burning fire. A froward man sows strife, and a whisperer separates chief friends. One of the things that can happen to damage friendships and relationships is people spreading rumors and gossip. A whisperer separates chief friends. You know, somebody goes and they say, hey, guess what so-and-so said? That does a tremendous amount of damage. You know, the old saying that I guess most of us heard and maybe said as kids, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Well, you know that's not true. Sticks and stones can break your bones, but words can hurt very much. When somebody says things about you, when maybe if you confide to someone, you tell them a secret, and then the next thing you know, everybody knows it because they've gone and blabbed. Or somebody goes and spreads rumors and they say things about you. Those are things that hurt. A whisperer separates chief friends. Somebody that goes and spreads rumors. Guess what he said? That sort of thing drives a wedge between people that have trusted one another, because part of the essence of any healthy relationship, whether it's simply as friends or coming all the way to marriage, any healthy relationship is based and has to be based on trust and respect. If trust and respect aren't present, then the relationship isn't very healthy. And how do you build up trust? Well, you do what you say you're going to do. If you give someone your word, you keep it. And trust is broken down and can be broken down very rapidly. That's an important thing to have in mind, because we can do damage to friendships and relationships that are very that are a lot easier torn down than they are built up. In Proverbs 17, verse 9, it makes a similar statement. It says, "He that covers a transgression seeks love, but he that repeats a matter separates very friends." Somebody who goes around, again, spreading rumors, spreading gossip, repeating things that they should just keep their mouth closed about. Those are the kinds of things that separate and damage relationships. So it's possible to damage friendships. Now, one of the things about a real friend, or we saw earlier that a friend is someone who loves at all times. A friend will be honest with you. In Proverbs 27:6, it says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful." Somebody is really your friend. They can tell you something, tell you the truth. It may be something that hurts. Maybe they tell you, they warn you about something. They tell you about something you're doing. And yet, even though it may wound a little bit, it sort of hurts your feelings, they're doing it from a standpoint because they care about you. They like you, they love you, they want to help you, and so they tell you something. And it's a whole lot better to have a friend tell you something that hurts a little bit than to have someone that doesn't care about you, and yet who's just, making out like they do. The kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Oh, they may say something nice to your face, but then they'll go around and say something terrible to your back, to other people. The one who's really your friend is somebody who's going to tell you the truth. He'll tell it to you in private. He's not going to try to embarrass you or humiliate you in front of other people. He's not going to go around and gossip and tell other people bad things about you. But he'll look you in the eye and he'll tell you the truth, because he cares and he's concerned. It tells us back in the book of Galatians along a similar line, Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, it says, "Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, you which are spiritual restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear you one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if any man think himself to be something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. But let every man prove his own work. Then shall he have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another, for every man shall bear his own burden." Now let's look at that a little bit. First, it talks about if somebody is overtaken in a fault. Somebody has a problem. It says, "You which are spiritual." That means if you have If you're able to give them the help they need, if you have the spiritual depth to help them, then help them. If you don't, then find somebody that can. It says, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness. In other words, if you see somebody with a problem, you go to them to talk about it, you approach them in an attitude where you realize, you're capable of getting into the same mess that they did. You don't go to them in a way of putting them down, in a way of looking down on them, but you realize that you're somebody just like they are. Then it says, bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Now, the word burden here in verse 2 is a totally different word than is translated burden down in verse 5. In verse 2, the word burden is a word that means heavy load. There are times when all of us are just sort of weighed down. Just life is overwhelming. One of the things a friend can do is to sort of help carry the load for his friend. In doing that, we're fulfilling the law of Christ. It says, if you think yourself to be something when you're nothing, you deceive yourself. Some people who go around with an attitude of just sort of focused on themselves and how great they are. We ultimately are to prove our own work. In other words, we're to take responsibility for our own lives. And that's what it means in verse 5, every man shall bear his own burden. Here it's a totally different word than this word heavy load up in verse 2. Here it means task or responsibility. We all have to take responsibility for ourselves and the things for which we're responsible. But we can help one another carry the heavy loads. If we see our friend, if we see our brother overtaken in a fault, we see somebody having a problem, then to go to them in a right attitude, to go to them respectfully, to go to them kindly, to go to them with humility, and yet to go to them trying to help them. That is important. We look here in terms of some keys to friendship and the kind of friend that sticks closer than a brother, real friends. Friendships that are based on trust and respect. Now, let's notice one other factor, and that is what is the most important friendship? What's the most important friendship that you can have? Well, notice the answer to that's back in James chapter 2. It talks about Abraham in verse 23, James 2:23. The scripture was fulfilled which said, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed to him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. The most important friendship you can have, it's wonderful to have friendships with one another. It's a wonderful thing when a husband and wife are best friends. That's what it ought to be. Friendships are things you can enjoy all your life. You can enjoy from the time you're a small child and you develop friendships. Throughout our lives, we can make and build friendships. But the most important friendship is the one that Abraham had. Abraham was called the friend of God. A friend of God. So Abraham learned how to be a friend, not just to other people. Abraham was a friend to God. Jesus Christ said to his disciples, recorded in John 15:15, he told them in verse 15 of John 15, he said, henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knows not what his Lord does, but I have called you friends. For all things which I've heard of my Father I've made known unto you. Friends communicate with each other. Friends talk to one another. Jesus told his disciples, he said, you're not just servants. A servant is not entitled to any sort of explanation from the master. He's just told to go, and he goes, and come, and he comes. He's told what to do, and he does it. Christ said, look, you're my friends. So Christ established a relationship of friendship, and he said that friendship was based on the fact that he told them things. He explained things to them. He told them all the things that he had heard from the Father. So friendship is based on trust. It's based on that sort of open communication. The most important friendship that we can build is to be a friend of God. Now, there's certainly ways to not be a friend of God. It says in James 4:4, "You adulterers and adulteresses, don't you know that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore shall be a friend of the world is the enemy of God." You can't fit in with the world and fit in with God at the same time if you're going to be God's friend. You can't blend in and fit in and be part and parcel of this society because the world isn't on speaking terms with God. The world has a totally different set of values. And there's a contrast between loving the world, not the people in the world. We ought to love everyone as a human being, but to love the world's ways. See, it tells us in 1 John 2:15, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him." You see, the world's whole set of values is passing away. There's something that's going to endure forever, and that is the ways of God. Abraham lived in a time when he had to make a choice, and everybody ultimately has to make choices. All the way down to childhood. You know, the Scripture tells us even a child is known by his doings. We all make decisions and choices. Abraham had to make choices in the world around him. And it was more important to him to be the friend of God than it was to fit in with the people around. Ultimately, our friendship and the depth of our friendship with one another here ultimately is based on our friendship with God. You know, we have a relationship with one another that is based upon, is an outgrowth of our relationship with God. When we have opportunities such as a camp out, you know, it provides a lot of things. It provides an opportunity to spend time together in a totally different environment than just seeing somebody at church for an hour or two. It provides an opportunity to spend time talking to people that maybe normally you never would have occasion to talk to. It provides an opportunity to do things together, to spend time together. It is a wonderful opportunity to cultivate friendships, to get to know some old friends better, and to make and establish new friendships, get to know people that you haven't known. It's a chance to spend time, it's a chance to talk, it's a chance to, and one of the things in talking together is because we're here, because we share a common set of values, then we've got something that binds us and draws us together. Let's take advantage of the course of this weekend to have fun, to have a good time, to deepen our relationships with one another, to deepen our friendships, to build those on a deeper, closer level. And that's something that can be to the benefit of the whole age spread we have here, from children all the way on up through adults. So, as we have the rest of the weekend in front of us, we have an opportunity to have a wonderful time. Let's, be careful and give thought, and certainly I'm delighted to see so many of our children here. We just want to be careful and make sure that we're all thinking in terms of safety and things of that sort, and watching our children, because we certainly don't want someone to be hurt. But let's utilize the opportunities the weekend holds out. Think about some of these things in terms of friendships and relationships, and seek to use this as a springboard, as an opportunity to deepen some of those friendships and to go forward in a very positive way. Before we conclude, let's what time do we have breakfast scheduled tomorrow?
Between 8 and 8:30.
Okay, very good. So that'll be the case, and then yes, we'll have children. We'll have Bible study. It's going to be especially geared for the kids at 10:30, and then we'll have Sabbath services at 3 p.m. So one other thing, just by way of a safety caution, I noticed some of these little laser lights around earlier, and I know they can be a lot of fun. They're fun to watch on the floor, but they can also do serious damage to the eye if they're pointed at an eye. So let's be very careful with those, and parents of children who have them, make sure that your children realize how dangerous they can be, because it can create a real problem, can even cause permanent sight damage, permanent eye damage, if something like that is shined in the eye. So let's be very careful and safety conscious, and let's have a good time. So we'll be concluded here this evening, and everybody, hope get a good night's rest, and we'll see you at breakfast tomorrow.